everyone. Give it a few minutes to see who we can get to join us this morning. It's good to be with you all this Friday. In just a moment, or just a few minutes, I'll be offering some reflections for each of us to consider. Let's give it just a few minutes. Good morning, Kim. How are you? You are the first. Also, how is Diane doing? I miss seeing you both and your hugs. Give it just one more minute and start at 10. Amazing to hear. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. This morning I'm going to offer a few different things. Walter, who just joined us, can tell you that my brain is all over the place all the time, but especially on Friday mornings, because I'm usually running to and fro from the Brown School to the Men's Fellowship into the office with, kind of like with my head cut off. But anyway, that's just, how things go, not just on Fridays, but typically. And so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to offer some reflections for you all, starting with a psalm from the lectionary, ending with a poem by Wendell Berry, and offering some thoughts in between. So first I'm going to start with Psalm 16, which we'll return to in these in this reflection. But Psalm 16 in our lectionary, in the freedom to be, which is the theme that we're going to be kind of exploring from home together with the rest of our staff and in worship and in our other reflections, we'll find that the Acts passage features pretty heavily each week in the lectionary. So I'm kind of breaking out a little bit to begin, as is my custom. And so I'm going to read from the psalm, but I hope that you'll look at all of the lectionary readings. But this is Psalm 16, so we'll start with that, and then we'll see where we go from there. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, I have no good apart from you. As for the holy ones in the land, they are noble, in whom is all my delight. Those who choose another God multiply their sorrows. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out or take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel, and the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me. Because the Lord is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure. Give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So that is Psalm 16. I wanted to talk about the freedom to be in a kind of general and countercultural sense. I apologize, I guess, for my flowery shirt. If you can see, I have been spending a lot of time in this season of social distance making food for youth families, so actually making pizza to order for families who have been able to hopefully enjoy the pizza, but also then it's given me the opportunity to go visit at a socially distant, in a socially distant way from their porch. And it's given me like a really nice rhythm, because the way that it works is that I wake up in the morning, have a routine that starts around 6 or 6:30, and then at 8 o'clock I start making dough, and I usually make two batches of dough, and it takes about 30 minutes per batch. And then what I do is I let them rise for a couple of hours, and then I go throughout my day and do what I will. But then after that, I roll the doughs out into pizza form, and then I bake them in the oven for 12 minutes at 425 degrees. Then I add the sauce, which in this period I have also made on the stove. And so I add the sauce and the cheese, and then whatever toppings have been ordered, and then I cook the pizza again for about 20-25 minutes at 375 degrees. And at the beginning of this, I've grown up doing a lot of cooking in my family and with my friends from college and grad school and all of that. But I still had to look at the recipe when I first started, and I don't have to do that anymore after a couple weeks of making pizza for families. But it's really, as much as it's structured, it's given me some freedom, and it's been a different kind of work than I'm used to. And then that I have a different kind of work that, other than my church work with Highland, as for many of you, most of my work life has been marked by the need for production, to produce and to make profit for my employer. And so I was kind of having some flashbacks to when I was taking inventory, like I need to get this many mushrooms, this many pepperonis, this many, blah, 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 back to when I was working in a different setting. And so I think what I want to talk about today is the freedom to be, is to be who you are without that being defined by what our culture and economy tell you, and what our culture and economy say is your value, and where your value comes from. I think that I've really been, kind of anxious about our economy and the way things are going to go with the, with the coronavirus and with the recession that predictably, will come as a result, however bad it's going to be. We have a number of families that, that I am connected to, both at Highland and elsewhere, that aren't exactly living with giant safety nets and, giant resources, should a crisis come. And so many of us are already living on a pretty fine line, and something like the coronavirus can push us very quickly into untenable and crisis territory. And so hearing as people's hours have been cut, hearing as employment has been cast into doubt, hearing about people being laid off, I think an important word for me that I find in this passage this morning is that our freedom does not come from our freedom to be, and our freedom and our being do not come from our ability to produce and to make profit. And it's hard to really move from that thought because our lives are so shaped by our work, and our routines are so shaped by our work, and it's hard not to internalize the idea that we are our job and that our value and being come from that. And so today I don't really want to offer kind of the economic solutions. I mean, I do think that if you believe that there is a God who is who we say God is, like we do at Highland, invariably you're going to feel compelled to make the world a different place. And I have a suspicion that the outcomes coming from, those beliefs will point in one direction, and not necessarily certain others. So, but I don't want to get into the political here. What I want to talk about is where our freedom comes from, and where our value comes from. And so I'll point you back towards the psalm that was read. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. And then in verse 4 it says, those who choose another God multiply their sorrows. I don't think it's hard or is a big leap to say that there are a lot of gods in American culture, and that profit and production are chief among those. And so if we make profit our God, if we make production or work our God, our sorrows will multiply. Because that's for a lot of different reasons, but I really think that it's just impossible for us to really know our value and know our freedom if we are only looking for it to the extent that we are productive and to the extent that we are able to contribute to the economy. And so that's not, I don't want to go too far along that road. But very basically, what I want to suggest is that our freedom and our freedom to be are something much more and much else than our ability to contribute and produce in such a way that profit is created. And the reason I don't want to take that too far is I do not want to minimize the reality and the material difficulties of unemployment, financial insecurity, debt, all this stuff. It's one thing to say our value comes from somewhere else. It's also another thing to have to live life on a day-to-day basis. And that's where I think the world-shaping part comes. But the psalm tells us, or the speaker in the psalm, the author of this psalm, talks about putting our faith in the Lord and not in other gods. And everything is not perfect once we take that step, but on a day-to-day basis, if we are willing to seek our freedom in God and seek our freedom in the God that we experience in one another, which is actually what's happening with some of the families that I've visited during this coronavirus, is it's actually nice to slow down and just be together. There's a freedom to be together that the normal way of things does not allow. When you're running the race from work to school to your other job to the grocery to, blah, 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 and we go and go and go and go and go. And in slowing down, there's a lot of things that have been difficult and a lot of things that are, very scary about this time. But a small sliver of goodness I have heard coming from those who have experienced the freedom to be together and to find value in one another that's not the work or the school or running the cultural race without ceasing every day. But the author of the psalm tells us that the product of making God the one in whom we find our freedom and our value, the product of that is rejoicing and gladness and a feeling of refuge, of fullness, of joy. And that's not to say that things will not be difficult, but the sorrows are plenty without us multiplying our own, right? I mean, there is so much about life that is difficult, and we can certainly make things worse on ourselves. But what this psalm is telling us is that it is those who worship other gods, and that could be, like I said, the idea that your value is your production, if profit is your god, if other things. I mean, drugs and alcohol, gambling. I mean, there are things that are really easy to point towards, but also finding your value and status and the affirmation of others based on superficial things. I mean, there's so many things that we might make our God. And this psalm is a healthy and good reminder that if we do that, we'll multiply our own sorrows. And there's plenty that goes on without us doing that. And so what I want to remind you all today, and remind myself, is that the freedom to be does not come from your employer, which is probably a weird thing for a minister to say since I'm employed by the church. But your freedom does not come from your employer. Your freedom does not come from your paycheck, although it is true that wealth brings more freedom because you can make more choices. But your freedom does not ultimately come from your paycheck or from your job. Your freedom is in God. And your freedom comes from the fact that you are beloved, not regardless of or not in spite of all the contingent things about you, but precisely because you are who you are. And that's such a hard thing to remember in these times, when we're thrust into financial insecurity, we're thrust into worry about the future, we're thrust into uncertainty and fear, and that can just be a hard thing to remember. And that's why someone like me needs to read a psalm every once in a while. Because if I'm living in the New York Times, things are not going well. And so what I want to do is finish with a poem that I know that Walter will appreciate, and many of you will as well, because it's a familiar one. But it's my favorite poem, which is an easy, I guess you could say this without having read very much Wendell Berry. I've read like a medium amount of Wendell Berry. But this poem is one of the most popular, and so even if you are not really deep into the intricacies of Wendell Berry's like lesser known works, this is one that you can hold on to, so you can say you love Wendell Berry too. It's called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front, and so I'm going to close with that reading today, and I hope that you hear in it the same thing that you hear in Psalm 16. And so I'm just going to read it and leave you with that. It is so good to be with each of you this morning. So good to virtually see each of you all. But here is Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front by Wendell Berry. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made, be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie easy in the shade. Rest your head in his lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. That is my hope for each of you this morning, is that you are able to practice resurrection. And if that means laying in bed all day and watching 20 Harry Potter movies, you should do that. If that means getting outside and going for a run or getting into your garden, if it means making bread with your hands or reading a book or writing a poem or drawing, if it means just telling someone that you care about them, if it means a phone call to someone that you have not heard from in some time, do that. Whatever you need to do, practice resurrection today for yourself, and know that your freedom comes from God and nowhere else. So good to be with you all this morning. Hope you have a great Friday.